Well, happy Thursday morning of DrupalCon. Woohoo! We hope you're having a fabulous time and have been learning a lot. I'm Stephanie Torres. I'm the Community Program Manager for the Drupal Association, and I'm just thrilled to be here. And you know, just when I think that my life can't get any better, here I am in Prague. Okay, come on, right? And I got to see Singing Carrots, which was phenomenal. And I get to support this fabulous community of all of you wicked smart techies. And you know, I've been here for 5 months at the Drupal Association, and I have to say that the thing I'm most impressed with this community is just your heart and passion. It's just so impressive. And the way that you give back, it's wonderful. So with me is Joe Saylor, our Membership and Marketing Manager for the Drupal Association. Yay! And we just have to go through some housekeeping tips before we get to the amazing speaker that we have for you, Aral Balkan. There we go. I just had to get my thing up here. Okay, so housekeeping. First of all, please look in your program at all of the people who have contributed to this amazing event, because we can't do it without all of you. So look at it, give them a big hug, unless you're not into that. And yeah, it's a community event, and we're so grateful for the community support. So, BOFs. You all know where the BOFs are at this point, I'm sure. And there are some, I think there are some more slots today. I haven't looked lately, but hook up. They're really great.
And of course, social media is a great way to connect. There are lots of hashtags and accounts, Twitter accounts. There's the Flickr account as well. And also a note that the hashtag for today's talk is there at the bottom, hashtag DC Aral. And he's let us know that he's ready for some great questions from the crowd, some tough questions. So he's ready to be challenged. So feel free to tweet in some questions.
And sprints. You know, the conference, the body of the conference is over today, but tomorrow is all about sprints. So please connect. The Sprint Mentor booth is right out by the DA booth. And they can hook you up, but it's a wonderful way to continue to contribute to this amazing project, so please get involved.
And don't forget about tonight is Trivia Night. It's always one of the more fun events of DrupalCon. It is at the Hilton at 9 o'clock, and the doors open at 8. There should be some fun prizes at that.
Yeah, and it's hosted by Drupal Ireland again, so they're a fantastic group, so don't miss it. All right, and housekeeping. I'm sure you all know how to get on the Wi-Fi. And you know, I want to say that yesterday, just a little side, at times the rest of the conference center went down, but our conference did not. Okay, so yeah, so our guys are working very hard. Pylon 1 is working very hard to ensure that we stay up and running. And additionally, we know we've requested that you all have one device at a time, and we know you're not doing that because we've had as many as 2,000 continuous devices on the network simultaneously during this conference. So that kind of tells you, I mean, it's really, they're really managing it very well. So.
And we do ask that you evaluate your sessions online, and you can do that right from the session page on the Prague site. And that does help us make a better DrupalCon every time, so we do ask that you do that. Thank you. And again, this is one community. We've said it more than once. Please do take care of it. We all need to do that, and we can do that by following the Code of Conduct, and that's there on the Prague site as well, /Code of Conduct.
Excellent. And just a big thank you to everyone, again, who is contributing. So. There are a couple session changes today. The Always Agile Not So Fast is replacing the session Reinventing the Proposal at 14:15 in North Hall. And the double session that was scheduled yesterday, and that just means 2 30-minute sessions, that's moved to 10:45 in the Business Showcase today.
All right, and it's the moment we've all been waiting for. We're really excited about today's speaker. Aral Balkan is an experienced designer. He's working to change the world by bringing design thinking to open source to create a new category of technology, experience-driven open source. Let's hear it for Aral Balkan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Today, we stand at a crossroads. In front of us are 2 paths. One leads to a digital free land of people who own their own data, devices, and their services. Empowered by this, they're able to safeguard their privacy, their civil liberties, and their human rights. The other leads to a digital feudalism, populated by digital serfs. They don't have the option of owning their data, devices, and services. All they can do is rent them from their faceless corporate landlords. And enfeebled by this, they enjoy neither privacy, nor civil liberties, nor human rights. We stand at this crossroads. And to understand how we got into this predicament, we have to understand the road that led us to this point. So, let's go back about 50 years or so, when there was no Google, before there was a Facebook, when there was no Twitter, when there was no Apple, and when computers filled up entire rooms. And if you wanted to use one, you had to drive to it. So this was a very different world. This was a world where computers were external devices. They were things that you went to use and then you left there. They were impersonal. There was nothing personal about them. These were cold, distant machines. They were disconnected from the rest of the world initially, and perhaps more importantly, they didn't know anything about the rest of the world. They were unaware of the world around them. They just existed in their own little boxes. And mostly, they were used in business. So this is kind of where we started out, with these cold, impersonal machines. But things changed very quickly, right? We got personal computers. And these were still not very personal. You did not carry them on your person. These were not things that you went to bed with in the morning, and in the morning? Wow, that's like DrupalCon. These were not things you went to bed with at night and then woke up with in the morning, right? They were personal, but we just meant that they were not used in the business. They were used in the home. That's how personal they were. And then these shrunk, right? They started getting smaller and smaller. We got luggable computers, and then we got portable computers. And today, we're at a point where these devices almost blend into the background of our lives. You know, my MacBook Air next to a latte. It's just beautiful. I don't even notice. It's part of my life now. At the same time, something interesting was happening to the telephone. This device that we used to use to talk to each other over great distances, again, became untethered, right? It became wireless, and we could carry it with us. And then it shrunk. But then, about 6 years ago, something interesting happened to the telephone. Its very nature changed. We got this smartphone, which for the first time was actually smart. And it let us do things. Now, the way I look at this phone is as a device that gives me superpowers. It extends my biological capabilities. With what? Well, it's got a whole array of sensors. It's got a GPS in it, which gives me the superpower of knowing exactly where I am in the world at any given time. Latitude, longitude, and altitude. Wow. It's got an accelerometer in it. It knows how fast it's moving. It knows whether it's looking up or down, right? Combine that with a gyroscope, and it knows exactly where it's facing. It's got 6 degrees of freedom. Combine that with the magnetometer that can measure the magnetic field around it, and you know which direction you're going in, right? It has a camera. It's got eyes. It can see the world around it. It's got a microphone. It can hear the world around it. And these devices are not even things that we carry in our hands and our pockets anymore, but maybe they're things that we wear, right? And they're always listening, and they're always looking. And all of these sensors are constantly gathering data about them. So remember the mainframe? It was unaware, it was detached, it was cold, it was external. That's changing. Now it's internal. It's aware of its environment via all of these sensors. And we wear them. We might wear them on our faces. We might wear them on our wrists. We might clip them like these Fitbits, which know how much you've walked and how much exercise you've done, how well you've slept, right? We just wear them on our persons now. These are becoming truly, truly personal. And what that means for us is that today, we have a very different relationship to our devices. These aren't external anymore. These are internal. We are becoming cyborgs. So we don't need cybernetic implants. We don't need things to be implanted inside of our body to become cyborgs. We just need technology that extends our biological capabilities, right? And it's always better to be a cyborg because, as you can see, robots can't go downstairs. So we totally win. But we are cyborgs today. We experience the world around us, and we manipulate the world around us using our devices. And our devices can either empower us or they can enfeeble us. This is how we should be looking at the technologies that we use. They either empower us or they enfeeble us. So let's take an example of a company that makes devices that people love, right? That empower people, and see how they do it. Let's look at Apple. So Apple has a range of devices that they create, right? They've got laptops, desktops, they've got the iPhone, the iPad. And all of these work together really, really well. They have iCloud, which ties everything together, right? So you don't have to worry about, well, I was doing something on my Mac. Can I continue doing it on my phone? Can I continue doing it on my television screen at home? Yeah, you can, because it's all tied in via iCloud. And what's the only thing you need? You need your iCloud login, right? You just enter your iCloud login, and you have an experience that follows you around from device to device. This is what Joshua Topolsky calls the continuous client. I can start on one device, continue the experience. It's a customized, optimized experience. It's different on my iPhone to on my iPad to on my desktop because these have different ergonomic considerations, if nothing else. But I'm having, as far as I'm concerned, a continuous relationship with my data, with what I can do with it. Let's look at another company that is beginning to get this. And that's Google. It's very easy to dismiss Google as they don't get, user experience, but they do. Let's look at how Google does this. So Google also has its own devices. Forget about Android for a while as the Android ecosystem, right? That's a distraction. Let's look at what Google is doing when it has its own devices. So it's got the Nexus 4, the Nexus 7, the Nexus 10. It's got Chromebooks, right? Again, it's also got a cloud. Well, that's what Google was originally. And all of these are tied together with your Google username and password. So do you see how these are very, very similar? And again, you can have a continuous experience. And in fact, Google did this way before anyone else with Gmail, right? Gmail was the email client that you could take with you, and you always had access to your data. So it was ahead almost of native interfaces. And now, what Google is also trying to do is enter into connectivity. So through projects like Project Loon, which wants to connect everyone in the world to the internet via balloons, they also want to control connectivity. So let's take a look at what Apple and Google control in what they do. They control hardware, they control software, and they control services. And now we're seeing a push towards trying to control connectivity as well. And this isn't an accident. Now, software and services, I don't see those as separate things anymore in today's world. So I'm just going to call them services. But the important thing is, what happens when you have control over all of these things? Because if you combine all of these things together, that's the experience that someone's going to have with what you're building. And if you control all of these things, you control the experience. And it's all about the experience. Now, I do talks on experience design. This is not one of them. But I do want to touch on a very important point, which is that you have to control all of these things to have control of the experience. Let's take a look at why. So this was me on a train trying to plug my laptop in. Take a look. It's not really working, right? This was first class on a UK train, and the only reason I was in first class was so I could plug my laptop in. And it wasn't working. Why? There are two components of this experience. One is the plug. It was a beautiful plug. It did exactly what a plug should do, right? If I could have plugged it in, it would have worked. And then there was a table. And the table was a great table. You know, it didn't break. I could rest my arms on it. I could put things on it. It was a great table. The problem was nobody thought about how the plug and the table would work together. Nobody thought about the whole experience. So the whole experience ended up not working. Of course, you can't keep a determined geek down. I was traveling with an extension cable, but that is not the point. Regular people don't. This is what Steve Jobs was talking about when he said, we make the whole widget. About controlling the whole experience. And that wasn't actually my worst experience on that train. This was. When it came time to leave, I was at the door of the train, and I couldn't open the train door. It was like the first time in my adult life when I couldn't actually open a door. And this is why. This is how you open the door on the train. You would wait for the door unlocked sign, okay, so the door would automatically unlock, and then you would have to open the window, put your arm out of the window, and then open the door. That's how you opened this door. So I was stuck. I didn't know what to do. Why, right? I mean, who thinks this is ridiculous? Yeah, this is ridiculous design, right? This is the worst possible design. It's not. It's actually not. This used to be amazing design. This used to be great design. When? This was an old train. Back when this train did not have automatically locking doors, this process would be just steps 2 and 3. Lower the window, open the door using the handle, right? Before it got automatically locking doors. Now, that's an example of great design. Because think about it. What happens if you're on a fast-moving train and you accidentally open the door and you step outside? You have a bad day, right? So if the result of a gesture is going to be catastrophic, for example, death, then you want to make that as difficult to perform as possible. That's great design. The problem is things changed. The train got automatically locking and unlocking doors. What they didn't do is then say, well, how does this affect the whole experience? They didn't go back and then remove steps 2 and 3 because they don't make sense anymore. Think about it in what you do. You must come across very similar things where you add a feature and you can't just add that feature, right, without thinking about everything else that it affects around it. We have to be cognizant of the whole experience because an experience is only as strong as its weakest link. And the weakest link will be the part that's not in your control. The weakest link of your experience will be the bits of the experience that you don't control or you don't have control over. So that leads to things like this. This was a Samsung phone that Samsung gave me. to try. I don't know why they did. And I turned it on, and this is the thing that I saw. The first moment I turned it on, it said, no SIM card or phone is turned off. Think about that a little. I know it's early, but just think about it. How can this happen? How can anyone write? It can happen if there are people in your organization who are thinking about hardware, and there are people in your organization who are thinking about software, and we think that hardware and software are two separate things and never the two shall meet. They're not like that, though. We can't separate hardware and software. If we do, it leads to things like this. And more importantly, consumers don't do this in their minds. We do as enthusiasts, but consumers don't. They don't separate hardware and software. When something goes wrong with their phone, they don't go, oh, yes, that must be one of the drivers that malfunctioned, and I think it's probably a little endian, big endian thing. No, right? They just be like, my phone doesn't work. My phone's not working. They evaluate the overall experience, as must we. There was a time when features were important. There was a time when every new feature you added made something that was previously impossible possible. And who cares how hard it is to use at that point? Because if the alternative is that you can't do what you want to do, you will learn and use something that's really difficult, right? I call this the age of features. And the age of features in consumer is over. Because for most things in the consumer market, we have feature parity between products. And when you do that, what differentiates your product is the experience. Features are a commodity today. One of these companies that makes one of these remote controls understands this. Can you see which one? Look at how different the outcome is when your approach is different. When you don't have an approach towards features, when you're not features-driven, but when you're experience-driven. So that's all I'm going to say about user experience. If you want to hear me talk about it at length, go to thelink.is/UX talk. That's just my URL shortener. The link is UX talk. So why is this important? Why is it important that some companies get user experience and some don't? Well, let's look at the companies that get user experience today. We've got Apple, we've got Facebook, we've got Google, we've got Twitter. They're very, very popular in the consumer space, right? They've got lots of penetration in the mainstream, and they get user experience. What is one common aspect of all of these companies and their products? They're closed. These are closed silos. These are closed systems. So you might be saying, so what? Okay, it's fine. I like them. I use them. Yeah. So I think this is the right time to tell you about my new startup. Are you guys ready? I know there are like no product pitches and stuff, but I think this is a great time. It's called Snail Mail, all right? And I'm really excited about this. I'm very excited about this because we are going to be revolutionizing real mail. Snail Mail, for the first time in history, is going to be giving you free real mail for life. Who thinks this is a great idea? Who wants to, am I leading you on? No, of course not. Put your hands up, it'll be fine. Who thinks this is a great idea? Who would use this? If you had free snail mail, you could send as much real mail as you wanted, and parcels and packages, and it was free. Okay. Even though it's pretty obvious I'm leading you on, some people are still putting their hands up, which is encouraging. Now, there is a caveat. There's a slight caveat. We do open your letters. Guys got to eat, right? We do open your letters, and we do read them, but we only do this so that we can provide helpful hints, helpful services for you. Just so we can help. We just want to help. And don't worry, because pretty soon, we just put everything back into the envelope, and you wouldn't even know that we were there, right? So who still thinks it's a great idea? Still wants to use it? Who wants to use it? There's always one hand of someone who's like, I'll do anything for free, man. I'll do anything for free. But you guys use Gmail, right? That's basically what Gmail does. Maybe it's not a human reading it, but that's basically what Gmail does. So if you want to tell your friends about snail mail, please do, snailmail.com, and we need to spread the word. Why? Why does Gmail do this? Why does Google do this? It's no big conspiracy. It's just about business models. It's actually very simple to understand. Google's business model, what drives them, what makes them money, is that they monetize your data. They need your data because that's how they make money. They make money not just from your data, that's just raw materials, but from the intelligence they derive from that data, right? And from the aggregate of all of your data, that's also very valuable. That's their business model, that's how they make money. So you might be saying, so what? Okay, well, let's do a thought experiment. Okay, we talked about user experience. So in design, if we could build the best thing possible, what would it be? What would be the ultimate aim of experience design? Well, I call it the experience machine. This is a theoretical machine. The experience machine is a machine that knows everything about the world, it knows everything about you, and it can read your mind. Now, if we could build this today, we could all go home, right? This is the one machine that could probably do everything we wanted, right? So, a machine that knows everything about the world, everything about you, and can read your mind. Let's see how close a company like Google is to creating something along the lines, along the timeline to the experience machine. Okay. So, Google has services that know about the world. Maps, Earth. They know what's happening through news, what people are looking for through search, that's how they began, right? What are people talking about? Well, they can see that. They know about you, where you are, what you're doing, what you like, who your friends are. Now through their health spin-off, they know how you're feeling. Are you okay? Do you have a little stomach bug? You know, they know these things. And they know these things because they have control over devices, services, and soon they want to go into connectivity as well. These are all avenues whereby they get data from. So just looking at this makes me think, you know, they've got their noses in a lot of different things. Their hands in a lot of different pies. And they started with services though, right? Google wasn't always like this. There was a time when Google was just a search engine, and they didn't even track you, right? They couldn't even identify you or track you. And with a service, you make a conscious decision to go to a site or to wherever that service is to use it. And then when you start using it, you sign in with your Google username and password, possibly now, today, and that's when they start gathering data. That's good for a company who needs data to live. That's good, but it's not perfect, because you have the option of using other services. And if you go and use Yahoo or someone else or Bing, then feel a little dirty now, then they don't get your data. Google doesn't get your data, right? Okay, so if you live on data, then you need to change this. What do? Well, how about giving people beautiful devices, beautiful computers, beautiful phones, but not at the true cost, at a much lower cost? What if you could give them that and you could ask them, okay, sign in to your phone with your Google username and password. Sign into your computer with your username and your Google username and password. At that point, they start getting data from that point on, right? And you can use other people's services. They're still going to be gathering data about you, which is better for a company that lives on monetizing data. What's the end game? Where can we take it next? Well, you can still use a different device to connect to the internet, right? So you might have your Nexus 4, but you might also have an iPhone. When you're using your iPhone and you're not using Google services, they're not getting your data. So it's still not perfect. Remember, the only way we can grow because of our business model is we need your data. What's the next step? Well, what if we could provide internet connectivity to people? What if we could make your internet sign-in, your internet login, your Google login? Now, if you can log into the internet with your username and password from Google, then it doesn't matter what device you use. They're still getting information about you as you're using it. So you can use an iPhone, that's fine. Google will still get information from you. So this is exactly what Google is trying to do with Loon, for example. And they must have someone in the audience today sabotaging it with the phone. Like, quick, turn on the alarm. I didn't know they were going to talk about this stuff. That's exactly what they're trying to do with Project Loon, right? So they want to give internet connectivity to everyone on the planet using balloons. And I don't understand why all of these sort of videos are always like these beautiful things narrated by children. Like this one's narrated by a little child. And it's all about like, oh, we're going to just improve the world. Okay, perhaps. But don't forget the business model. We need your data, right? Exactly the same thing Facebook is trying to do with internet.org. They just want your internet username and password to be your Facebook username and password, ideally, right? But again, it's all about, this is their video. This is like, it's all about improving the world and all of these happy people. And that's what they want to do. But really, it's about business models. Free services need your data to survive. That is the only thing you need to understand about them. They need your data, right? They need more and more of your data to grow. It almost reminds me of The Little Shop of Horrors.
Beep, beep. Does it have to be human? Beep, beep. Does it have to be mine? Beep, beep. Where am I supposed to get it?
Feed me Seymour. Feed me all night long. That's right, boy. You can do it. Feed me Seymour. Feed me all night long. 'Cause if you feed me Seymour, I can grow up big and strong.
Yeah. So Google needs you to feed it so it can grow up big and strong. So does Facebook. And again, they feed on your data. So you might be saying, so what? Well, they don't just take your data, they also share your data. So in 2005, Facebook had privacy controls where the defaults were semi-public. Some of your stuff was private, some of your stuff was shared only with your friends, and some of your stuff was shared with everyone. And I think actually by default, none of your stuff was shared by everyone. But things changed. Right? From 2005 to 2010, more of your data became public by default. They changed the defaults, right? And it's very hard to adapt when defaults are changing. If you listen to Dana Boyd on this subject, she says people can adapt to private by default or public by default, but if you're changing the defaults, that's very hard to adapt to because you don't know where your baseline is. And by 2010, everything, apart from your contact information and your birthday, was public by default. So it's not just gathering data, it's also sharing data. So you might be thinking, so what? Well, they share it with lots of different groups and people. So this is the real logo of a program that the US had called Information Awareness Office. This is actually real. Which aimed to capture all the data, right? Give me all the data. And if you're going to do that, seriously, do not create a logo like this with an all-seeing eye and give it a name like Total Information Awareness. Because, yeah, people tend to get a bit scared when they see stuff like that. And this went away, but of course, the reasons and the desire didn't. And we know from the Edward Snowden leaks that the NSA really doesn't understand PowerPoint design. But also that the NSA has been working secretly with the companies that we know and trust, these free services and not so free services, to have basically backdoors to information. What kind of information? And you can see, actually, this is kind of cool. I think this is a rare slide for another reason, because you can see Microsoft was first at something, which doesn't always happen. So, you know, I think they deserve a round of applause for that one. They're getting there. They're getting there. So what kind of information do they share? Well, pretty much everything, right? Why? Why is this such a great relationship for government and free services? Well, it's much easier for the government to ask these corporations for your data after you've volunteered it to them. They're not under the same protections. If they had to surveil you personally, they would have to go through a much more convoluted process. Much easier to ask the corporations for data you volunteered to them. So you might be thinking, so what? Well, surveillance is an intrusion. And I guess the real question is, how much of an intrusion is it? And this takes us back to our relationship with our devices. Remember, I said we're like cyborgs today. Our devices are cybernetic extensions of ourselves. They're not necessarily external objects that we have a relationship with. They're more like internal objects. So why does that matter? Well, it matters because we get to the question of where do we draw the boundaries of the person? Traditionally, we've drawn the boundaries of the person at our physical boundaries, right? Of our bodies. But is that still the case? So is this how it is? We have the boundaries of our person, and our devices are separate objects, and we have a relationship as would two actors. Okay, if that's the case, then surveillance isn't great, but they're intercepting messages between two people, something that you might overhear if I'm talking to my device, right? What if these devices are actually cybernetic extensions? What if the borders look more like this? What if the border of my person extends to my device? When I type something into my phone, is that an external communication? Or am I just supplementing my memory? Am I supplementing my brain? Is it an extension of myself? Now, this is fundamentally important, because if it is an extension of myself, there is no external communication going on here. So if there is an intrusion, if my communication is intercepted, this is an internal intrusion. This is an assault on the boundaries of my person. In which case, sorry, love it when that happens. In which case, oh God, we're gonna get that. There we go. If we are cyborgs, then surveillance is an assault on the person. So you would think, if it is this, then this is pretty grave, right? And that these companies would probably not be happy with this situation. So let's look at what Eric Schmidt has to say about it. He says, there's been surveillance for years. I'm not going to pass judgment on that. It's the nature of our society. So Eric, what should we do?
If you have something that you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. Maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place.
If you have something you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. Eric Schmidt. Okay. And I have to give it to Eric. Okay. He is a stand-up guy because he didn't just say this. He wanted to prove to the world that he means it, right? So he started, and like right after he said this, he created a couple of websites and shared, photographs and videos of himself just to prove this. So if you want to see them, like one is ericstoiletantics.com, which is nice. He's also got ericstopmasturbationadventures.com, which is interesting, not my thing. And also, sorry, I'm going in the wrong order. Eric's favorite sexy times, which is good, but my favorite is ericstopmasturbationadventures.com. Of course, Eric Schmidt did not create any of these websites. And of course, you don't see these private moments that he has on the internet. Because privacy is not about having something to hide. Privacy is about having the right to control what you share and what you keep to yourself. It is not about having something to hide. Now, if you want to learn more about exactly what happens in the terms and conditions, etc., of these services that we sign up to, there's a great documentary called Terms and Conditions May Apply. Some of the clips that you saw I actually took from there. And you can watch that at tacma.net if you're interested in learning more about exactly how these things work. But that's the problem. So at this point, if this is all we had, we'd probably be feeling a little depressed. Okay, the world is against us, what do we do? And we're probably the last audience in the world that needs to be depressed, because we are the ones who can actually do something about it. So what is the alternative? Well, take the experience machine. Is there an alternative to having Google own all of that information and all those services? Well, of course there is. Knowing everything about the world, that's what open data is related to. So we should really be supporting that. Knowing everything about you, well, own your own data and the intelligence derived from it. And what about the bit where we read your mind, the interfaces, the devices? Well, own your own tools. That's where open source comes into it. So we can definitely do this. And the key thing is to own your own data, right? But not just the data, but also the tools that are used to gather that data, manipulate that data, share that data if you want to share it, right? And maintain that data. And also any intelligence that's derived from it, because that has more value, right? If you look at Google now, it can tell you when your next bus is going to be from work to home, right? We can do that without letting Google know that information. So that I call the digital self. And the real challenge of our times is how do we empower regular people to own their digital selves? And it's easy. Even today, it's easy, right? Here's what you do. Number one, you clone the Git repository of your own server, right? Of your own social network, right? And then you configure and deploy it to your own server, right? And then you ask your friends to do the same. And we've solved this problem. It's not easy. And that's one of the major problems that we have. Who does this? Who would do this even in a room full of geeks? Right? Who would run their own distributed social network or their distributed own iCloud? Maybe some of you do. A few of you are putting your hands up. Who in the regular audience would? Probably no one. And we will never get those services to this position, right? It will never be as easy as tweeting or Facebooking from that menu in an iPhone, right? Diaspora, whatever, will never be up there. Why? Well, because closed likes closed. Closed knows how to work with closed. Closed is never going to integrate you at that level. But we need to compete with this if we want an alternative. And we need to compete on user experience. We need to create seamless technologies. Things with beautiful defaults. I know the open world loves seams. It's almost like a dichotomy between seams and being seamless. And seamless is bad because we see it as everything that's embodied by closed. We need to embrace that. We need to embrace not just intelligent defaults, but beautiful defaults. What about the seams? We can layer the seams, right? Those two are not mutually exclusive. We can have beautiful defaults, a beautiful seamless experience from the start, and then layer the seams. But we have a cultural problem in open source today. So let's take Linux to find out what this is. Here's how Linux developers think the world works, okay? You buy a machine, you find the right one for yourself, the perfect machine, right? And then you either download or you get a DVD, remember those? And you install the software, right? And then number 3, you're happy, right? Now this is how the world really works. People buy a computer and they're happy because it just works. Do you see there's something missing here? And actually, this is how Linux really works. You're like, which computer do I buy? Does the Wi-Fi work? Does this work? Does that work? What do you mean download and install? What does install mean? Why doesn't the Wi-Fi work? And then you're just like, what's going on? Wi-Fi, that's all I want. It's true. And then there is a fourth step. You buy one of these, and then you're happy, right? So let's take a look. Let's take a look. Someone's just held up their Mac. There should have been a moment. So let's take a look. Is it just maybe Linux desktop? No, let's take a look at the main contender in the open space, in the consumer market, Firefox OS. So I tried to live with a Firefox OS phone for a week. And please, if you're evaluating a new technology, don't do it on ideology. Don't do it on screenshots. Live with it for a week and see if it empowers you or it enfeebles you. So what did Firefox OS do to me? Well, this was my first experience. Hello, was please set the date. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here, okay, and say that probably nobody's bought this phone in 1980. I don't know. I mean, I'm guessing here. So why do I have to scroll through 30 years to set the date? That's hello. That's quite a fuck you of a hello. I experienced this. That is a valid error message on this operating system. I thought there was something wrong. I reinstalled the operating system twice until I heard from friends that they also get this error message. This is the Maps application when it first starts. I do apologize if you can't read it, neither could I. In fact, there is a button on the lower right of that screen that I've never been able to hit. It became a casual game at one point. Every now and then when I'm bored, I would pull it up. Will I be able to hit the button? No. Maybe it was just a very difficult game, and I'm not good enough. I ended up with 2 Twitter apps on my start screen. One from one app store and one from the other app store. I don't know what the difference was, apart from one I could actually read the text and one I couldn't. So I used the one where I could. This is me using that Twitter app. I'm sorry, it's my direct messages to my girlfriend, so it's a bit sloppy. But if you can't see the message that I'm writing, that's okay. Neither could I. It was being covered by the keyboard. And this probably is not immediately apparent, but this is what led me to lose 2 hours in London because the train times website would not work properly, and I didn't know that all the trains out of London Bridge had been cancelled. And so I ended up going there and losing 2 hours of my life. And that's what the technologies that we make can do. They can empower you, or they can make you lose hours out of your life. And open source today is features-led. That is the only type of open source that we have. So in a lot of ways, it is like those old days where features were important. It's a sandbox for enthusiasts. There's nothing wrong with this, right? A lot of awesome things come out of enthusiasts, people who love to tinker, break things, where breaking is part of the process. That's how you learn, right? You like it when things break. And then putting them together and having all those seams exposed. But we're not the only people out there. So we have these categories, right? Enthusiast, enterprise, the business market, right? And then consumer, right? Are these stages? Some people say, well, technologies go through these stages. They start with the enthusiasts, but then they go to the business, and then eventually they'll be adopted by consumers. I don't think so. Are these your identity? Is this how you are, and you can be nothing else? If you're an enthusiast at everything, you're a geek. You have a little room in the basement somewhere with no natural light, and you survive purely on soda and pizza. and you're probably male, right? These horrible stereotypes, right? Is this your identity? If you work in a business, are you a suit? If you're a consumer, are you a mere mortal? I'm guilty of perpetuating some of these. I don't think so. I think that these are roles. So think about it. You could be an enthusiast for one thing. Let's say you have a classic car and you're an enthusiast. You love playing with that car, breaking it. When it breaks, you like it because you need to tinker with it and play with it more, right? It's almost a feature that it breaks every now and then. You don't want it to work that great, so you want to play with it, right? But maybe you drive a truck for work. You didn't buy the truck, your boss gave you the truck. Is it a great truck or not? You have no say. Fine. And maybe you have a car that you drive to work every day, and you just want that to work, right? You don't want to tinker with it. You hate it when it breaks down. This isn't your identity. Enthusiast isn't your identity. It's a role that you play for certain things. These are roles. And we can't, and this is the important bit, we can't magically expect solutions that we create as enthusiasts for people who are enthusiasts or playing that role to trickle down magically to consumers because we have different goals, and that's really important. So I call this trickle-down technology, and it doesn't work. It's just like trickle-down economics doesn't work, right? Trickle-down economics says if we incentivize the really wealthy to make more money, somehow, magically, it will trickle down to the less fortunate, right? If we look at the US, for example, where 1% of the population owns 40% of the wealth, they're still waiting for trickle-down. And in technology, we're still waiting for trickle-down. Right? We've had 30 years of Free Software Foundation, 20 years of open source. We don't have one example of mainstream adoption, widespread mainstream adoption in the consumer market of open source. Right? Of course, open source runs the internet, but that's infrastructure. I'm talking about a seamless product that can compete with, say, an iPhone or a Nexus 4. We're so far away from that. Because we expect solutions that are created by enthusiasts for enthusiasts to magically trickle down to consumers. Basically, in our industry, we've been giving people PCs for 30 years when all they really wanted were iPhones, and then calling them too stupid to use them. I'll give you a hint. They weren't the ones that were too stupid. It's just a matter of audiences. When you design for the needs of one demographic, it doesn't magically then also meet the needs of a different demographic. And it's a cultural thing. We have a culture of democratic design in open, right? But design is not democracy. If 3 people want to implement the same thing, you don't just implement 3 versions and then add a preference in the settings. I've seen this, right? Instead, you need focus. So here's an example from iDVD, which was a product that Apple put out. And this was their initial meeting with Steve Jobs. The company that was bought created all of these features, the feature listing, the spec, etc. They had all of these wireframes. And he tells the story, the head of the company, Mike. He says, Steve Jobs came in, and he ignored all of that. And he just drew a window. And he said, that's the window. And he drew a button. And he said, that's the burn button. And he said, you drag a video into the window, and you press the burn button, and you get a DVD. And that's what we call iDVD. And that's the sort of focus that I'm talking about, which cannot happen in a democracy. Design's about saying no, 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 no. And you need to have authority to say no. And that's very important. And design is not veneer. It is not makeup that we put on after everything else is complete. That's decoration. That's not design. Design is not just about aesthetics. You can read more about this at the link is design is not veneer. And you can read a lot more about all of these things on my website as well, aralbalkan.com. So if you want to learn more, go there. But the fundamental thing is, design is about organizational structure. So if you're doing it like this, and in a lot of organizations, it's like that, designers are like, we need to focus on design, we need to focus on... No, it won't work. It has to come from the top down. Or else you won't have the budgets, you won't have the schedules, etc. Great design is a symptom of a design-led organizational structure. So we must design the organization before we can design the product. Your biggest design challenges will be organizational, because we misunderstand the nature of design and development. Design and development are not these separate things. Design leads development. Development informs design, and it's a cyclical process. And maybe we get scared of design because we think it's something that people who wear only black do, you know? No, let's call it assumption, because that's all design is. We assume, we make assumptions, and the only time we actually understand what we're building is when we actually start building it, and that informs the next set of assumptions. But it has to come out of a vision. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. You can't do focus groups. You can't ask your users for this. This is something you have to have. Your users are not the experts. They're not designers. You are. So everything comes out of this vision, your assumptions, your testing. You filter the results of your test through your vision. You don't just implement everything everyone says, and so on and so forth, hopefully every 2 weeks, right? So design is not about drawing a straight line, or it's not about pixel pushing or making things pretty. It's about psychology. It's about neuroscience, linguistics, sociology, philosophy. It's about understanding humans so that we can make things for humans. What kind of things? Things that improve their lives, that enlighten them, that empower them, right? So we need to create a new category of technology. Design-led open. What I call experience-driven open. Because this is a missing quadrant of technology. We have features-driven closed, right? The Microsofts, the Nokias of the world, they're still living in the age of features for the most part. We have experience-driven closed. The Apples, Google, when it's making its own products, not Android in general, right? But in open, we only have features-driven open. We're missing a whole quadrant of technology. This is quite a conspicuous thing to be missing. Experience-driven open is a whole area of technology that we're missing. So you might say, so what? Well, you remember our friends? Apple, Facebook, Google, Twitter, right? And they're closed. People are using them because they're experience-driven, because they create a seamless, beautiful experience, right? And remember how we said, what's the alternative? We need to get people to own their data, right? What I call indie data, owning your digital self. The whole idea behind indie data is to empower regular people to own their own data. And in order to achieve this, we need mainstream adoption in the consumer market, a market that we're not even addressing right now. Experience-driven open technologies are a prerequisite to this. And if we do this, we actually have an advantage. Because if you consider indie data versus big data, look at their business goals. Like with indie data, we can, for example, let's say we're creating a phone. We will sell that phone at its regular price, not subsidized, right? Maybe we'll sell optional services around it. What does big data do? Well, they sell devices at subsidized prices, under their true value, right? And then they sell users' data. So we're getting a divergence in the needs of the corporation, of the company, and the user. So with indie data, your business needs are aligned with the users. You just want to make a better phone, a better service, because they're paying for it and they're buying it, right? With big data, your business needs are diverging from the user's needs, which means you have a user experience disadvantage. So strangely, ironically, if we were to do this, we would have a user experience advantage over the free services. An inherent user experience advantage. So if you want to learn more about that, look at indiedata.org. And I just want to end by saying, I'm not just talking about this. This isn't some theory. I'm actually doing something about it. I'm starting up a new company to do exactly what I said earlier. We are going to create a phone, and the operating system for that phone, and the services around it, the core services, to enable regular people to own their own data. So we're going to control hardware, we're going to control software, we're going to control services, and we're going to do some interesting things with connectivity. But I'll tell you what we're not going to do. We're not going to be tied to the carriers. We're going to start small so that we don't have to be. And the whole idea is to create this beautiful, seamless experience. So that's Prometheus, and you can find out more about that at codename-prometheus.eu. So today, we're standing at a crossroads. Before us are two paths. One leads to a digital freeland of people who own their data, their devices, and their services. And they're empowered by these tools to protect and safeguard their privacy, their civil liberties, and their human rights. The other path leads to a digital feudalism, populated by digital serfs who can't own, who don't even have the option of owning their data, devices, and services, who have to rent them from their corporate landlords. And they're enfeebled by this, and they enjoy neither privacy, civil liberties, or human rights. So we stand at this crossroad, and we have to ask ourselves, can we afford to take the wrong road? So I say to you, join me. Let us bring design thinking to open source. Let us start creating experience-driven open technologies that empower people to safeguard their privacy, their civil liberties, and their human rights. Let us realize the dream of indie data. So I say to you, let us take the road less traveled. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say thank you also to the people that made this presentation possible. I've used clips from that movie that I told you about, Terms and Conditions May Apply. It's a very accessible movie to a consumer audience. If you have friends, relatives, etc., it's available on iTunes. Ask them to watch it. It'll be a great introduction to the area. And some artists have shared their work with me. This is Weave Mirror. It's actually very cool. That's made of actual materials that there's a camera and it changes, the weave changes to display a picture of you as you're standing in front of it. That's by Daniel Rosen. I just want to thank people who shared their work with me. A lot of them under Creative Commons. If you're not aware of Creative Commons, you should be. It's an extension to copyright. It uses copyright to say not all rights reserved, but some rights reserved. So this presentation wouldn't have been possible if people hadn't shared their photographs under Creative Commons. And also a big thank you to the Naum project. If you're not aware, perfect place for icons, and big thank you to them as well for sharing their work under liberal licenses. Thank you again. Yeah. Thank you. Hey,
Great.
Jos.
Great, Aral. Thank you very much.
Do you have any questions for me?
Great show. We've got some. Right?
Okay, awesome. Let's do this. Wow, it feels like I'm on a game show now.
Especially at the beginning of your presentation, this undertone of a little bit of alarmism. Is that deliberate? I mean, can we have great UX without personal data? I mean, that's what it's all about, right?
Well, I guess there are two questions there. Is there an alarmist streak to this? No, I don't think so. I think it's important that we recognize where we are today. I don't think it's too late to do something about it. I think maybe 3 or 4 years down the line, it may be too late. I think this is a good time to be doing things. And there are lots of different people who are doing lots of different things around the space. You know, you've got the mail pile folks who are trying to create a consumer email experience where you own your own data, for example. There are, even in the operating system space, for example, you've got, I think it's Elementary, I keep mixing it up, OS, which is a Linux distribution that's very much aimed, that's very much experience-driven. Of course, the limitation is they're still thinking in terms of an OS, and you have to think in terms of the whole experience, not just the operating system, but it might evolve to that. So I don't think there's a reason to be alarmist about it, which implies that there isn't a real problem, but that we're trying to make it seem bigger than it is. There is a big problem, but it's not a problem that we can't overcome. And I think this is the audience, you know, where more than anywhere else, we have the people with the skills to overcome them. You know, for every one Eric Schmidt that says, if you have something you don't want someone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place, we have 1,000 of you who can make the tools to make a different world. So I don't think we need to be, you know, depressed about this. It's not about being alarmist. It's about understanding that there's a problem and then fixing it.
So we're facing a little bit of a mindset problem, especially if the design industry, I mean, are they stuck? Or how do we educate them? How do we get that mindset change?
I don't know what the design industry is. That makes me think of design agencies, and they're part of the problem. You know, design is not something you sell. Design is a process. So if someone tries to sell you design, you go to a company and they say, we'll sell you design. Just walk away. Right? Because what they do is they sell you wireframes and they sell you prototypes, and then they wash their hands of it and they go, oh, your developers ruined it. Yeah.
We heard that one. I'm sure about that.
Our beautiful baby, and what have you done? That's not design. That's selling design. Right? They have different goals. Design is an iterative process, and design and development cannot be separated. So I don't know what the design industry is, but we definitely have a problem in the open world, where either we see design as veneer, either we see it as makeup. Well, we need a designer to make this thing look beautiful. Not going to work. That's not how it works. You don't just create something and then make it beautiful. This isn't plastic surgery. We have to incorporate
that doesn't work either,
that.
right?
Sorry?
Plastic surgery doesn't work either.
I don't know. I have nothing against it, but whatever makes you feel good about yourself.
There you go. Then your speech went on to privacy and trust, right? Beginning with all the big corporations and stuff. You're doing a startup.
Yeah.
So why do we trust you? Right?
Good question.
What's the deal?
So I guess the question is, like, how do we know that, let's say, Prometheus becomes successful at some point? How do we know that you're not going to do the same things? How do we trust you? Great question. Almost as if I told him to ask me that. No. So that is a very good question. And it's a question I've gotten in the past as well. And the important consideration is business models again. What is your business model? If your business model is an inherently honest one, which I see as, you know what, here's a fish. I'm going to sell you a fish. The fish costs this much. Have the fish. We're all happy. There's nothing hidden in the fish. The fish is not going to spy on you. You know, it's just you bought a fish, and we can understand this. It's fine. That's our business model. Here's a phone. Okay, we're selling you the phone. It probably costs as much as an iPhone, or it costs as much as it needs to cost so that we're not making a loss on it, we're making a profit on it so we can keep running our business. And if you want us to take care of your data, well, okay, fine. You don't even have to be technically literate, right? Just give us your payment details. We'll take care of your server for you. You don't even have to know what a server is. But that's our business model. We're taking care of your stuff for you if you want us to. If not, here's the open source server. Do it yourself, totally fine, right? But we're selling you a phone. So it's against our own interests to change, to go against our fundamental business model. Google's fundamental business model is we monetize your data.
Yeah, but once you've sold your 500 millionth phone,
yes,
you're a big corporation. And then?
And then what? I mean, you can set things up in a way so that it doesn't go in that direction. So you can set up, for example, a social enterprise where the social mission is as important as the profit motive, where the majority shareholder has to be the one that protects the social mission of what you're doing. So I think part of it is a failing of imagination on our parts. You look at all of the success stories coming out of Silicon Valley, and what's common about them. First of all, you create a free service to get as many users as you can. And then you get venture capital, right? And venture capitalists and angel investors, there's nothing angelic about them, right? Mm-hmm. They're giving you money because they want 4 times that money back at some point. At which point? Maybe a year or 2 down the line when you have tens of millions of customers, then they go, well, now 4 times the money back, please. And what do? What is the only thing you have of value? The data of those users. So what do? You screw your users. That's the model. That's the model that we love. That's the model that, that's the model that we adore, that we glamorize with films on Facebook. And we glamorize this model which doesn't deserve any glamorization whatsoever. It is an inherently dishonest business model.
So we try to fix that. How can you fix that in something like Drupal, open source, free and open source? You're going to have privacy issues. We're going to build in privacy. Is that a business model? How can you make money with that? Is that an option?
Well, I think Drupal has, from what I see, a very different audience. I mean, it's very much, from what I can see here at this conference, very much enterprise-based, very much a business platform as far as I can see it. Not so much a consumer one. I mean, I might be wrong in that, but I do see quite an enterprise presence, at least here. And so that has different concerns. And Drupal itself is not a end-to-end solution, but doesn't need to be either in this case. I mean, it's not, the stuff that I'm talking about is really more about the consumer market and how we need to make inroads into there, not so much about the enterprise market. But everything that I spoke about in terms of user experience, of course. Because even in the enterprise market, sure, the thing that differentiates it is the people using the product are not the ones making the purchasing decisions. And that means that, and we see it, you can get away with a lot of crap, right? Because you take the right people out to dinner, they sign the check, and then some other poor people have to use it. But maybe the next time the purchasing decision happens, it'll be based on whether it was usable or not, or maybe the next time. So I think user experience, even in the enterprise, is the long game.
Okay, so if we take that one step further as the last question, something that got retweeted like crazy,
okay,
which is interesting. Superpowers, right?
Superpowers.
Our devices give us superpowers.
Yeah.
So, very specific for open source, for something like Drupal, how do we use free and open source to use these superpowers wisely? Any tricks, any do's and don'ts, so what direction?
Look, there are no tricks in this, okay? There are no tricks in design. There are no magic bullets. Be authentic. Know why you're doing what you're doing. Evaluate what you're doing. Is what you're doing having a positive impact on the world? Are you changing the world in a positive way? Are you enjoying that? Are you enjoying what you're doing? If you're not, maybe that's a sign that you should be doing something else, because we have these amazing skills. We are so fortunate to have the skills and the knowledge that we do, because we are at a point in our lives where we can change this world, right? So ask yourselves, each one of you, am I doing that? Am I making the world better? And if not, what can I do to make the world better? And I think that will give you the authenticity you need to create great tools and great products that actually make the world more open, make the world freer in terms of liberty, and make the world a better place. And I think that's what it comes down to. There are no tricks. It's about authenticity. It's about knowing why you're doing what you're doing, and hopefully having a good reason for doing it.
That's cool. Thank you for your speech. Thank you for your time. I'm looking forward to Drupal 8 or 9 or Drupal 9M on Prometheus phone.
Okay, we'll see.
That's all right. I will. Thank you very much.
Right.
Okay,
thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Aral. That was really, really thought-provoking. Yeah,
thank you.
It was great. Well, everyone, thank you so much for this morning. Don't forget that closing session is today. So be sure to, doors will open at 3:15. and there's still a lot of conference left, so enjoy. Also, if you're not a member of the DA, we strongly encourage you to join. The funding that we receive from membership helps fund all of the amazing programs and grants that we're able to do. So please consider it, and you can do that online. Thanks so much.
Like the legend of the Phoenix, all ends with beginnings. What keeps the planet spinning?